Londra'dan herkese merhaba. Bu bölümde değerli bir yayın konuğumuz var. Dünyanın önde gelen ekonomi gazetecilerinden biriyle buluşuyoruz. Financial Times'ın baş ekonomi yazarı Martin Wolf'la birlikteyiz. Dear Mr. Wolf, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. It's a great pleasure to have you today.
It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Mr. Wolf, first of all, with your decades of experience as one of the world's leading economic commentators, how do you assess the moment we are in right now? Many are calling this the largest energy shock in modern history, with oil hovering around, over $100. The Iran war was widely discussed beforehand, so perhaps it wasn't a classic black swan. But would you say the scale of its consequences qualifies as a black swan? Did you expect a shock of this magnitude in oil markets?
So the answer to that is so let's go back to the sort of the beginning of my analysis. When the war in Gaza started, I wrote a column a few years back on what the consequences could be. And I said that in and of itself, it wouldn't have large global economic consequences. But if it ended up as a war in the Gulf, which was certainly possible because from the Israeli point of view and the American point of view, Iran was seen as behind Hamas, and therefore this extension was possible, then it will be a very major event. There's no doubt about it. So I was already aware of the risk, and everybody who studied the oil in the world economy knows that the Straits of Hormuz are a choke point, that a very large part of world oil goes through that strait. It's incomparably the most important area, choke point for exports of oil, and the cut would be very, very large if it were closed. So that all seems obvious to me. It's not surprising. So in that sense, it's not a black swan. It's a sort of grayish swan in the sense that you couldn't judge the probability of this happening, but it was clearly a severe risk. What is surprising is that the Americans started this war without apparently having a plan for this. That was a real surprise to me. And of course, now the two sides look locked. They can't agree on a settlement. And the result is, of course, that the economic costs will get bigger the longer this goes on for. And they are very serious, potentially could be the biggest oil shock in some senses ever. That's certainly plausible. That's what the IEA has said. And I think that's perfectly possible.
You have written a column, The Great Commodities Disruption, referring to the World Bank's commodity markets outlook. So you are also dwelling on the questions, what is next? You have put there two big questions. I mean, the first is how far the oil now blocked up in the Gulf can be replaced, and how long the near total closure of this strait will last. So we are watching two things, Hormuz and the oil prices. So how do you think we will see a normalization? Some say that before Trump's China visit, Trump wants to end this war. Do you agree the timing about the diplomatic, relations with China as well? What do you say?
I think it is perfectly plausible that Trump wants to end this war, but he wants to end it with something that looks like a victory. And it's pretty clear that Iran doesn't want to give him a victory. Now, I don't know what the big stumbling blocks are, the main ones, but pretty obviously one of them is whether Iran gives up all hope of having a nuclear program that could lead to a bomb. And I would have thought if I were in the Iranian government, you'd want that even more now. So giving that up is difficult. Also, I think the Iranian government has very good reason not to trust Mr. Trump. It's a terrible thing for me to say that. But if you look at his behavior in the first term and now, he's not trustworthy. He might change his mind. He's constantly changing his mind. So it's going to be very difficult for the Iranians to do a deal with America. And on the other hand, for Trump to just walk away without any sort of deal, declare victory, and leave essentially Iran in control of the Gulf, which is what it is basically a defeat for America. It means the position of Iran is actually strangely stronger than before. So I think there's a good chance a deal won't be reached, even if he wants one. I'm not saying it won't happen. Some people think Iran will have to concede because the blockade by the US is so costly to them. And others say the US will have to concede because the domestic consequences are so great, the economic consequences are so great. But I've come to the view now, I really don't know. I really don't know. And it is possible that there will suddenly be a settlement of some kind, not, I think, a peace agreement. I find that difficult, but maybe a ceasefire of some kind in which the blockade of the Gulf by both sides stops. But of course, there's a risk Iran could start again and America could start again. It wouldn't be over. And that uncertainty will remain. Finally, of course, if it does stop, there is damage and it will take quite a while to get back to normal. That seems very, very clear. Stocks have to be rebuilt. So this is shrouded in immense uncertainties.
Yeah, immense uncertainties, as you mentioned. When we look at the situation that we are going through right now, do you think we shall get used to the levels of oil like $100? And what does it mean? Do you think $100 oil is the new normal? And what does it mean for the people on the street? Because when you look at the markets, for example, to Wall Street, sometimes it appears to be pricing as if there's no war. But of course, there is the impact on the people on the street. So is $100 the new normal? And how do you think this will impact the people on the street?
Again, I think the honest answer is I don't know. $100 in real terms is actually not extraordinarily high by the experience of the last, since the 1970s. There have been periods when it's been higher in real terms. The increase is substantial, but it wouldn't be immensely surprising if it remained at this level for a long time. But you can certainly argue that if everything gets back to normal, it'll go back to where it was before. The general shift in the world economy is away from oil. Consumption of oil has become less important over time. I think this will accelerate the move to renewables. So in the long term, the price could fall very rapidly. On the other hand, I wrote a column a few weeks ago which argued if it stops for a really long time, say a year or so, prices could go far higher than $100, maybe 150 or even 200. Why not? So the basic point here is what the economists call the price elasticity of demand for oil is very low. In the short run, we can't substitute for it. So if there's a significant reduction in supply, and it is significant, if you take all the exceptional measures, it can be as much as 20 million barrels a day. It's not likely. Sorry, 20 million barrels a year. The result could be a much higher prices. And again, it depends on what happens now. Now, in terms of what it means for Main Street, well, if you look around the world, energy prices are much higher, gas prices are much higher, fertilizer prices are much higher, and they will remain so. And that will affect food prices, food production. It will affect people's standard of living, and ordinary people will be very unhappy across the world.
Rising inflation and weakening growth. So what's kind of a dilemma is this for central banks, for example, for ECB? And how do you think this will impact on euro and Europe in general?
Well, I think the central banks are very much in a wait and see mode. They don't see shifts in underlying inflation yet. And that's what they really worry about. And above all, they worry about inflation expectations. And I think they will wait to see whether inflation expectations are shifting, because that's really what concerns them. And so I expect them not to do much, or indeed anything, for a while. If, of course, this continues, and it's clear that these very high prices are indeed the new normal, because the disruption continues, could get worse with more destruction, then they will probably have to react, because in the end, the only way of stabilizing the world economy will be a marked economic slowdown. And one of the ways that happens is through central bank action. But I don't expect it to be urgent or dramatic. I think they will feel that the situation can be watched without decisive action from the monetary policy point of view. This is, after all, recessionary, even of itself, because it's a big reduction in people's real incomes.
Mm-hmm. So what do you say specifically on Turkey as a neighboring country, as an energy importing economy? What does a sustained $100 oil environment can mean for countries like Turkey?
Well, obviously, like all other such countries, the big oil importers throughout Asia, countries like India, China, everybody is very, very badly affected. It's a price shock, it's an inflationary shock, and the result will be weaker demand in the world economy. And Turkey depends on international trade, and a lot of its markets are going to be affected. Clearly, European markets are extremely important for Turkish exports and goods, of both goods and services, and they're going to be weaker. I don't think there's any doubt about it. The growth will slow if this crisis remains as it is. All the forecasts suggest that. There are only differences in the degree. Look at the IMF forecasts in the World Economic Outlook, the World Bank, as you say. Our private sector forecasts all suggest a significant slowdown, particularly among oil importing countries like Turkey, Europe, and most of Asia.
And lastly, Mr. Wolf, what is the one risk you believe markets are still underestimating today? And when we look back a decade from now, will this be remembered as a temporary energy shock or as a turning point that reshaped the global economic system? And what is the true cost of this war to world economies?
Well, stock markets are peculiar things. So I don't think stock markets don't forecast the economy. They forecast the profits of the companies that are in the stock market. We should all remember that. And I think the markets are probably right that the companies that matter most, particularly the tech companies, are not going to be dramatically adversely affected. For them, the biggest risk is that the AI boom turns out to be a bubble. Of course, a big global recession is something that is not in the market. But at the moment, I still think that's not a probable outcome. There will be a slowdown, there's no question, but not a huge global recession. So I think the markets are not irrational at what they see. And I suspect for them, the big risk is, as I said, that AI turns out to be a bust. But yes, they are being pretty optimistic. And if the central banks feel they really have to tighten, the markets will have to correct, I think.
Mr. Wolf, thanks for joining our program and making this time for our program.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
Financial Times Başekonomi yazarı Martin Wolf'la buluştuk. Sözü İstanbul'a bırakalım.